Now I call upon the next speaker, the Honorable Dr.M.S.Valiathan, a very well-known international figure, presently National Research Professor and Honorary Advisor, Manipal. Friends, you know Dr. Valiathan as a strong supporter and admirer of Ayurveda. His work on Charak, Sushrut and Vagbhat is well known to us. He will be speaking on basic science approach to Ayurveda. Let us welcome Dr. Valiathan. Please.
Madam Jalaja, other distinguished colleagues on the dais, and friends, I am greatly honored to be asked to speak here at the plenary session of this 4th World Congress of Ayurveda, which has gathered here physicians, scholars, students, and friends of Ayurveda in large numbers. I would like to express my thanks to the organizers for giving me this great honor. Madam Jalaja has given you the big picture of Ayurveda, the existing picture, and what is emerging before us. That has made my job a lot easier. I must say that a little semantics, my title is a basic science approach to Ayurveda. Ayurveda is science. So what do I mean by science approach to Ayurveda? I must clarify here, by basic science or science, I mean modern science like modern biology, immunology, bioinorganic, chemistry, etc., which date back to the time of the Enlightenment. Before that, they did not exist in the form that we know, mainly associated with names like Bacon and Harvey and Vesalius, etc. So that clarification is necessary when I talk about modern science approach to Ayurveda. Now, modern science approach to Ayurveda, it became relevant in India only with the East-West encounter, when the Western powers started coming to India. Before that, there was no East-West encounter as far as Ayurveda was concerned. But Ayurveda has a very long history, long before this. Going back to the Vedic times, you heard the chant today, the Ashwini Sukta being chanted this morning. All the Vedas have references to illness, treatment, medications, especially the Atharva Veda. Almost 1/3 of it consisting of hymns, chants, about illness, about good health, etc. Now that was followed by a very long phase, almost 1,000 years of Buddhist India, where you find all these chants practically disappeared. In the Ayurveda practicing today, we hardly hear any Vedic chants. And this disappearance, the Atharva Vedic chants, hymns disappearing, that is largely a contribution of Buddhist India, when Ayurveda flourished, even though they did not use the word Ayurveda at any time. Takshashila was a great university, where Buddha's physician Jivaka was an alumnus of this university. So it flourished, Buddha himself prescribing what we call Ayurvedic medications, Nasya being practiced by Jivaka. So Ayurveda, in fact, the leaders of Ayurveda were Buddhists. Our own Vagbhata, who wrote Ashtanga Hridaya, Ashtanga Sangraha, Vagbhata was a Buddhist. So they were the great leaders. And then came a few centuries, the golden age of Ayurveda, when the great Samhitas, Charaka, Sushruta, Vagbhata, that is the golden age of Ayurveda. This was followed by a long phase of stagnation, where you no longer hear about Charaka or Sushruta, you no longer hear about Takshashila or Nalanda, and that was the time the Western powers started coming. So it is no more than a moment in the long history of Ayurveda. And the first encounter was the Portuguese coming to India in the 16th century, establishing themselves in Goa, and we are not getting into the politics of the colonial administration, but our interest is, along with this Portuguese entry into Goa, there was a most remarkable man Garcia de Orta. He was a Spanish Jew who studied medicine, became a physician, and he came to Goa, and he lived in Goa more than 36 years. And he saw, he observed, and the tropical diseases took thousands of lives. The population in Goa, from 400,000, in 10 years it reduced to 40,000, mainly because of cholera, dysentery, diseases they're not familiar with. Now Garcia de Orta, that is where the science looking at Ayurveda begins. He published a most remarkable, some of you may have heard about, but book, Colloquies on the Simples and Drugs of India. There he talks about 57 colloquies, each dealing with a particular medicinal plant which he saw being used, very good description of the plant, very good description of the diseases which were treated by this plant, the results and so on, all in the form of very interesting dialogues. Now this book created so much interest in Europe, it was translated into many European languages, and this was followed by Van Reed, another remarkable man, the Dutch governor of Cochin, and he again labored for more than 30 years. He was an administrator, a count, a man of nobility, but he collected around him 100 people, including 4 plant experts from South Canara, and also an Ayurvedic physician from Kerala, Itti Achyutan. Now this remarkable group of people, Van Reed identified a Carmelite who could draw very nice pictures of plants. Now this group worked for 30 years, and if you read the Hortus Malabaricus, originally published in Latin in 12 volumes and translated into English and Malayalam by Manilal in Calicut, who was never honored by the nation, I must say. Now this Hortus Malabaricus, the pictures even today, they're extraordinarily fine. More than 700 plants, mostly in Kerala, but also coming up all the way to Goa. Now this was the second in the 17th century. So whether it was Garcia de Orta or Van Reed, subsequently followed by British scientists like Ainsley, they were all looking at it through the eyes, through the window of plant science. So the first window, science window to look on Ayurveda was plant science, going on up to the end of the 17th century. And this was followed by 18th, 19th, the search for drugs had begun in Europe, mainly chemically derived drugs. In the 19th century, for example, a very remarkable person, Ehrlich in Germany, syphilis was a big problem in Europe at that time. There was no remedy, and the desperate search, more than 900 experiments before he came up with Salvarsan, which was supposed to bring salvation, an arsenic preparation. So these chemically derived drugs, the search in Europe, that had an impact here, mainly the approach of pharmacology, that is the next window. And in India, this was taken up by Sir Ramnath Chopra, who started looking at medicinal plants of India. Now, what we call clinical pharmacology today, all that we are doing, really can be traced back to Sir Ramnath Chopra, who was in Calcutta School of Tropical Medicine, and he was the one separating compounds, studying the compounds, looking for effects by the bedside, looking for signs of toxicity, and publishing extensively, and his 2 volumes became the classics in clinical pharmacology. That was the second window, science looking at Ayurveda. And the third followed very quickly, because Ramnath Chopra's work on medicinal plants, that led to the birth of natural products chemistry in India, where we became a leader in the world. In the 20th century, the first half, we have such remarkable people like Professor Ashima Chatterjee in Calcutta, Govindachari in Madras. These were all outstanding natural product chemists, organic chemists. And there were literally thousands of papers published from India on medicinal plants, the compounds, purification, isolation, studies of activity, and so on. In fact, this enormous database even today is being used by modern researchers, especially by multinational companies, because that gives the basic information. Even Sarpagandha, which we all know, Ravolfia incidentally does not figure in Charaka or Sushruta. It came later to India from somewhere, whether it came from Arab sources, whether it came from China, we do not know. But that Ravolfia, the actual studies, the organic chemistry was done by Ashima Chatterjee. So like that, organic chemistry, natural product chemistry, that was the next phase, science looking at Ayurveda. But the second half of the 20th century, the most outstanding development in science was molecular biology, mainly because the human genome was unraveled. We could understand the so-called secret of life, DNA. Now the DNA, it changed our whole perception of life, because human beings and a worm, human beings, 30,000 genes, almost 75% we share it with the humble worm. And human beings, 99.9% genes we share. All the differences we have, caste, religion, and color, these all become insignificant when you look at the biological basis of life. In fact, it is a validation of an old Indian verse from Hitopadesha, Ayam Nija, Paro Veti, Ganana Lekhuchetasa, Udara Charita Namtu, Vasudhaiva Kudumbada. This is mine, this is ours, this is theirs. This is the notion of small minds. But for the broad-minded, the whole world is a family. Now, our molecular biology has brought us to the same conclusion. So there is a major change in our perception itself. Secondly, in a very short period of time, this so-called basic science graduated into biotechnology. Nowhere has happened earlier. Basic science, if at all it has any application, it may take many, many years before it comes into a technology. But in the case of molecular biology, it was very fast. And biotechnology has already given us, in the field of medicine alone, it has given us large number of products. For example, diagnostic kits with high degree of accuracy. Products which we can use in treatment, human insulin, erythropoietin, growth hormone. These are all products of biotechnology. Or look at new vaccines, DNA vaccines. These are all products of biotechnology. So that is modern biology. Now, naturally, if plant sciences, pharmacology, organic chemistry, all these have looked at Ayurveda through their own windows. Now today, it is natural that molecular biology looks at Ayurveda. That is the new window through which Ayurveda is being viewed today. How do we do this? There are several ways of doing this. I just want to give a few examples. But this approach, when you look at it through molecular biology, we should not expect any immediate results in the form of like biotechnology. It may come, it may not come. But some of the examples to give you, for example, we have a very fundamental concept in Ayurveda is Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Now these are a combination of traits, as this audience knows very well, physical traits, mental traits, behavioral traits, even similarity with traits in animals. All these are considered in determining Vata, Pitta, Kapha. This Prakriti is determined at conception. It cannot change. Now this is fundamental in determining the manifestation of disease in individuals. A disease in the Vata Prakriti and Pitta Prakriti will be different. Similarly, the response to treatment is also determined. It's a very fundamental. Now this, a fundamental concept, does it have a biological basis? Now that is very important. Biological basis means, does it have any biological evidence in terms of gene structure, in terms of gene function? Today we have the means to study. That's a very fundamental question. Or secondly, if you look at plants, in Ayurveda, the plants are anti-Vata, anti-Pitta, anti-Kapha for neutralizing disturbances of various doshas. Of course, there may be overlaps, but these plant groups, three groups, when you look at them, morphologically, they're all similar. There is no distinctiveness. Taxonomically, you cannot find any distinction, but therapeutically, they are different. Now, is there a basis, a genomic basis for it? Or is there a metabolomic basis for it? That is again a basic question where we are applying modern biology to study an ancient concept. Take, for example, a basic procedure like Rasayana, which promotes healthy aging, aging without tears. Now, if you want to study that, you can use modern biology today. When you give these Rasayanas, apart from the patient feeling or the subject feeling well, is there something it does to the body? the DNA chain breaks which can be induced, they always heal. Nature has this, that is the beneficence of nature. If you cut your skin, the skin will heal. Otherwise, surgery would be impossible. They're always healing. And DNA also will heal. Now, this DNA healing, is it promoted by, we can measure that. Is it promoted by rasayanas? That can be studied. Similarly, Panchakarma. You know, Panchakarma is used extensively in this country, and patients with, let us say, painful joints, limitation of movement, etc., they report they become pain-free, the joints become more mobile. When these changes happen before our eyes, what is happening to the metabolism in the body? What is happening to the immunologic functions in the body? These can be studied. So like these, there are a number of scientific questions which arising from Ayurvedic concepts, Ayurvedic procedures, even Ayurvedic products. For example, bhasma. There is a great deal of controversy, as you know, about the use of mercury. And mercury, the use was Rasa Shastra. That was a very big branch of Ayurveda. Now, in modern medicine or pharmacology, using mercury in medicine is completely taboo. It is inconceivable. I was myself, as a medical student in 1950s, I can never forget, there was no oral diuretic in those days. So a patient who had congestive heart failure, who had fluid collected in his legs, hardly able to breathe, if we have to give a diuretic, there was no way. We had to admit the patient and give him a mercurial diuretic injection, which was highly toxic. And many of us have seen patients developing renal shutdown by the treatment. Now, that mercury is being used in Ayurveda, like Magaradhwaja or Rasa Sindhu. And if you talk to experienced Ayurvedic physicians like Raghavan Thirumalpad, they will tell you we don't use it very often, but we use it. We don't see these problems. Now here is a riddle. How do we explain this riddle? That is again basic science is what will do it. Because if you chemically analyze that Rasa Sindhu, you will find mercury there. So you cannot convince anybody, the modern world, modern medicine, or the authorities, that there is no mercury here. But perhaps modern science has given us a tool to examine the microstructure of this plasma, which could not be done 30 years ago. Now, when you do the microstructure, because plasma preparation, as you know, it is a very elaborate process, taking several days. Mercury and sulfur, how they are purified, how they are mixed together with the juice of Eucalypta alba and various other things. That is how it is made. Now, during that process, the structure of the mercury and sulfur, they change. Because what happens in this, a study done by Professor Roy in Kharagpur IIT has shown, in the chemically synthesized mercury sulfide, there is only mercury and sulfur that exists in one phase. But in the Rasa Sindhu, prepared according to the traditional protocol, that also contains only mercury and sulfur, but it exists in 4 crystalline phases. And also the particle size, there is a nano transformation taking place in this process. So if it is a nano transformed, nano crystalline substance, its properties have nothing in common with that of bulk mercury. Now here again you find basic science approach to Ayurveda. Whether you look at concepts like Vata, Pitta, Kapha, or in the laboratory, that's exceedingly difficult. The second question, which difficulty is, this study question to make a protocol which you can do in the laboratory. Not only you can do, which can be replicated by many others. Now that formulation of a protocol is not easy because it involves modern scientists, it involves Ayurvedic physicians, perhaps others. Now third, you have to find willing, enthusiastic participants, first-rate scientists, first-rate Ayurvedic expert, both deeply interested in the question. Such a partnership, very difficult to do. And lastly, most difficult to overcome the skepticism. Many of the modern scientists, they will simply refuse to have any look at it. They say, well, it is difficult for us to get any PhD students. Nobody will come for this. So most of them will flatly refuse because they want to publish. The ambition of a scientist today is to publish in high-impact journals. Now this I cannot publish in those, so they will not look at it. And Ayurvedic physicians, they are also equally resistant. They will say there is no need for this. We have been practicing it, getting good results for thousands of years. We don't need this modern science. So this kind of skepticism, you have to overcome this. And of course, lastly, you have to find the financial support for this, which only can come from the government in India, because there is hardly any privately supported research in India. So these are all the formidable difficulties, but I am glad to say that after some effort, now the Government of India, through the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office, they have supported some kind of research like this, which has made some progress, and now the Department of Science and Technology is formally going to support this from the 1st of April. So that opens a totally new field. And what is the expected outcome of all this if you do this? First of all, the outcome, I would put it like this. If you do a particular study on dosha, prakriti or rasayana, that study will open 100 questions for further study. That is how science grows. So it is like a big tree with branches, constant ramification. It becomes a huge tree, but the roots are always in the soil of Ayurveda, because the concepts, procedures, products, these are all coming from Ayurveda only. So you have a huge tree with branches, flowers and fruits, all rooted in Ayurveda. And that is a tree which we named Ayurvedic biology. That is the term the Department of Science and Technology has given the emergence of a new discipline which the world will take note of. That is the most important. And the second, after the entry of modern science in India, physics, chemistry, etc., even though Ayurvedic students complete 10+2, they all learn physics, chemistry, biology. If you look at the Ayurvedic community and the science community, there is an iron wall. There is absolutely no communication between science and Ayurvedic communities. That is how it has been here. There is no forum where they interact. Now that barrier will slowly crumble as this discipline grows. There will be more and more interaction, more and more PhDs, Ayurvedic MDs doing PhD in science, vice versa maybe. So in so many ways you will find this barrier crumbling in the next several years, and greater interaction, collaborative studies become stronger and more productive. And lastly, I would like to conclude by saying, Charaka in his beginning of the Samhita, there is a classification he gives, medicinal plants, 50 different types, some for diarrhea, some for headache, some for fever, like that he gives a classification. At the end of it is a certain number of medicinal plants and the application. That is how the table goes. At the end of it, Charaka says, Mandanam Vyavaharaya Buddhanam Buddhivarthe. This classification, this table I have given is useful for the dim-witted average physician. Mandanam. But he doesn't stop there. Buddhanam Buddhivarthe. For those with knowledge is to increase the frontiers of knowledge. That is what he says next. So I do believe that when we try to do work of this kind, applying modern science today, modern biology, tomorrow it may be something else. We look through that window on Ayurveda, you are most likely to uncover new bits of knowledge, adding a little bit to the pre-existing knowledge. There is one way to carry out Charaka's mandate. There is one way to repay our debt to Charaka and all these great masters. And this is in fact in line with Mahatma Gandhi in his commentary on the Gita, very interesting place. He says, as you know, Gita was an exhortation to Arjuna to fight. Regardless of consequences, you stand up and fight. But Mahatma Gandhi's fight was a very different kind, as you all know. In commenting on that, Gandhiji says, I believe it behoves on the children to enhance the legacy of their forefathers. So if you go beyond Charaka, Charaka may not have said anything about nanoscience. He may not have said anything about molecular biology. In doing that, adding this little bit, going beyond, we are actually carrying out what Mahatma Gandhi has said, enhancing the legacy of our forefathers. I believe it is our duty to do this, and I'm so glad such a large audience, large number of young people here, they will take home this message. Thank you very much.